Hi there, Mike Kearns here with the Kearns Power Group. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe during this challenging time. Our first quarter market results are in, and I wanted to give you a quick update on how our real estate market has performed year to date. I want to talk a little bit about how COVID 19 is affecting our market, and I want to share with you some thoughts as to where we think the real estate market may end up once we get on the other side of this and life starts to get back to normal. So, on to the first quarter results. In the Southern Georgian Bay region, we saw some records broken again in the first quarter of this year. So, volume sales, so the total number of listings sold, up 19% over the previous year, some impressive growth there. We saw the average price of a home increase significantly as well in the first quarter, up 10% over that of the previous year. A notable statistic given that last year was a record breaking year in terms of price. One more thing to point out, demand slightly down in the first quarter of this year. We did see an increase in supply, which all in all was actually a positive thing as we've had a shortage of supply. So this kind of has brought us back to a what we'd consider a balanced market. So we have a listing to sales ratio of 48%, which is only slightly favoring buyers. And this, of course, is the market as a whole. We have seen a little bit different statistical information from some of our submarkets. So getting on to that, we'll start with the Blue Mountains, where we saw a similar trend there to the market as a whole. We saw an increase of 10 listings, a 13% increase over the year previous. Active listings, here's where we see that big growth in terms of supply. We're up 20% in the first quarter over that of the same time last year. Average sale price up modestly, 1.6%. To a total of $741,000 as the average sale price in the Blue Mountains. Meaford, slightly different story there, although we did see the number of sales increase slightly by 4 sales in the first quarter, a 13% increase. Active listings remained, for the most part, unchanged over the previous year, only 2 more listings in 2020. Meaford is a little bit different environment than what we're seeing in other markets, as it still remains a heavy seller's market with only about 3 months of overall listing supply there. To give that some context, in the Blue Mountains, we're seeing about 5.5 months of supply. So definitely a market that's still short on listings and favoring sellers. This is evidenced with the growth that we saw in the average sale price. So an increase of 23% over the previous year in the first quarter. So from 429 to almost 528,000. Now, as impressive as that growth is, we do need to take that with a bit of a grain of salt, as the sample size is still pretty small at this time of year. Only 34 transactions to pull from, so we'd certainly expect that to level off in normal circumstances anyway. So how did COVID-19 affect things? Well, March really told 2 different stories. The first half of March, up until the 15th, we saw a trend that was mirroring that of the previous month. So an increase in sales volume, an increase in pricing, and then once we hit the middle of the month, we see things drop off sharply. In fact, 2/3 of the total sales activity in March happened in the first 2 weeks. So obviously, once we hit mid-March, that's when the social distancing measures came into place and businesses began to shut down, and our economy as a whole kind of ground to a halt and brought along with it our real estate market. So if we look here on the right, we have a graph showing activity in Ontario. So we're seeing a normal kind of trend line here running through winter as we push into spring and head into March, starts to peak, which we saw was trending well above the previous year. And then all of a sudden we hit middle of March and we just fall off a cliff here. So that's the social distancing taking place. So bad news for buyers and sellers that have to transact right now. But the positive takeaway from this is that Obviously, people are taking these social distancing measures seriously, and they're putting their real estate needs on hold until this passes. So the big question is, what do we think is going to happen to our real estate market once social distancing efforts start to be softened and things get back to normal? Well, our real estate fundamentals were very strong in Canada heading into this, so we do expect to see a fairly quick recovery, at least in terms of sales activity. What we do anticipate is for there to be some pretty strong downward pressure on prices the longer this persists and the deeper the recession gets. Obviously, as our economy starts firing on all cylinders again, we do expect to see prices to start to recover back to an area that we saw in the spring where we left off. We do expect demand in our region to remain high for obvious reasons, and our market to recover a little more quickly than some. I provided some great articles that are linked out in the blog. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into this, we've got a great video from Phil Soper, the CEO of Royal LePage, with some of his predictions. I've also got a link out to a great report that was written by RBC, talking a little bit about what we see for the future of real estate in Canada. So thanks for joining me today, and please reach out if you have any comments or questions. I hope everybody has a safe and happy Easter weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.